Let's travel back in time to 1954 in honor of the 70th anniversary of the Strat. We are reviewing today the American Vintage 2 reissue of that 54 famous guitar. Stick around. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name is Chris McKee.
And they call me Cooper Greenberg around these parts.
We're here with Alamo Music in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, like our videos. If you want to support the channel, visit our spring store link below for custom swag and check out our podcast, The Fretboard Confessional, wherever you get your podcasts. So, 70 years.
Man, I remember back in those days. This thing blew the whole world up, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, you are an old soul, so I believe part of you was around back then.
Yeah.
So, yeah, 1954. Now, this is actually kind of the second time I've done a video on this guitar, it feels like, because 10 years ago, if you go back far enough in our YouTube history, and be forewarned if you do that, we didn't really know what we were doing back then, but this was one of the earlier guitars that I reviewed because 10 years ago, when it was the 60th anniversary, they did this with the American Vintage Uno line. And you know what? It's reissued just like it was then. It's a 54. You know,
54 Strat.
So it's basically the same thing as what they did. And good thing. I mean, how do you change what happened 70 years ago? You really can't. But it's nice to have it back because it is really the start of things. It is, you know, one of the things that always gets me, and people talk about this online with guitars, you look at a lot of the guitars that are still popular today. The Stratocaster has never gone out of production. Mm-hmm. The Telecaster has never gone out of production. The Les Paul actually came back. But this, I mean, Leo really got the recipe right kind of from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because while you can get a more modern variation of this, if you squint, they kind of pretty much look exactly the same.
They do, and you got to think about like the contour of the body and the, you know, modular nature of the guitar. Like that is a pretty modern, forward-thinking. You know, you could have seen a 1951 Strat that was a big old cutting board or whatever, but you know, it's as it is right now. This guitar fits in just as well in 2024 than it did back then, and yeah, like you said, a lot of the specs on this do not differentiate that much from the one we got back there, which is Ventera 2, or some of the custom shops that we hopefully are going to get our hands on today,
or even an American Pro 2.
Pros. I mean, the Strat stays the same. There's things that have become weirder, and some of those things have come and gone, but be it pickups or neck profiles or finishes or colors or anything like that, it's still a Strat. And this is a pretty good example of, you know, why it's stuck around. The woods, pickups.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy thinking about like the ergonomic shapes of the body that you pointed out. I think one of the reasons that it has lasted is it really was way ahead of its time in 1954. And what a kind of huge change, because if you think about it, like 1950 is basically where the Tele starts, and I lovingly and affectionately call it a cutting board with strings on it. But yeah, just 4 years later, this was really a huge step forward and has continued to be famous. What makes this a 54, particularly in the reissue sense, is, well, as they say, the devil is in the details. And there's a lot of things here that it's almost really like, for better or for worse, this is how things started in 54. One of the first things, if you get this into your hands, that I always notice with these guitars is the pickups, because it's one of the things you look down, you see the guitar, and you immediately notice something's a little different here. So these are your 3 single coil pickups. They are flat magnet, so there's not a bevel to the magnet. They are staggered. They are lower output pickups, and these are the pure vintage reissued 54 pickups. What you'll notice is that the pickup bobbin covers are a certain plastic, and they're very rounded.
Yeah.
I mean, extremely rounded on these compared to what you would typically see on...
Kind of flattened out.
Yeah, on a squared-off one.
It goes along with the knobs, too. Knobs are a little different. The switch tip's a little different. And the switch itself, 1, 2, 3.
Three-way.
And that's how it was done.
Yeah, that's right. Like an early Tele, we've got a single ply pick guard on this. And you know what they did before with this, and they're doing again, is these plastics are the same type of plastics that were being utilized back then. Again, you know, for better or for worse. If you've ever go back and watch like Austin City Limits, Eric Johnson playing on that Strat, and like everything's kind of broken, you know, after a certain period of time, which is very interesting. The bridge, all of the saddles, these are what they call pure vintage. These are built on the same machines that these things were being built on back in Fullerton back in the day. So that's for the bridge plate and the block and the saddles and everything.
Ash body?
2-piece ash body with 2-color sunburst in nitro finish. It is a nitro finish guitar, as it should be.
As it should be. The neck is what they were referring to as a 1954 C. Feels very, very good to both of us.
I would call it a chunky C.
It's a chunky C, but it's not like a overly chunky 51 Telecaster kind of feel. It's
yeah, I really like it.
It's comfortable. You can see, you know, a big difference. You compare it to a Pro 2 now with the modern C. It is gloss finished with the nitro, but it's a little more substantial, but still very comfortable and really nice. Love that.
Yeah.
You know, just like down to some of the details of like the, you know.
The shape to the head. Yeah, it's a very softened. Everything about this guitar is a little softer in certain aspects. To me, I think part of it, because I know what's happened is that Fender has gone back and they've looked at examples that they got their hands of these 54s, and they have basically reproduced them. And one of the reasons that I think there are softer aspects to things like you know, the transition from the neck to the headstock is because a lot of it was probably being kind of hand sanded and worked into shape. And I really dig it. You know, going back to the neck shape, the reason I wanted to double check the spec is because I liked it so much. I'm like, I would like this on a custom shop Strat if I were to get one. What is this neck shape?
Yeah, absolutely. Vintage style tuners. Now, in terms of pickups, they're 1954 sounding pickups, which maybe if you see the older video that Chris was talking about, you already kind of know what that sounds like. It is not, these are not fat 50s, nor are they fat 60s or V-mods or noiseless. These sound like an old school Strat, and there's a brightness to them that if you're not dialing in your amp correctly, like if it is correct, it gives you that sound, very vintage, old school Strat sound, Buddy Holly-esque. But you know, if it's not right, if you're going in and your treble's already cranked on the amp, it's going to be a little bright.
They're very bright, yeah.
But I do think we got some good sounds out of it. Now, you'll notice in the demo that you'll hear all 3 positions, and there's kind of a little break between the neck and the middle because I'm figuring out a way to balance that right there.
Which is what people were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can get the in-between sounds on a 3 switch. However, you can also easily switch it to a 5 switch.
You can, and we were debating on whether or not they include that or not in these, because there's some cool case candy stuff in the case, so you get certificates of authenticity. They reproduced original like ads and stuff.
You get a strap.
You get a strap finally. You know, I remember back when you could get an American Pro and get a strap Fender, but at least, you know, there's a vintage strap included with this one.
There's a little bridge cover.
Yeah, the ashtray, and then also a gray 1/4-inch cable.
Yep, which looks like a very old cable.
It does look like a very old cable.
Relict even. Yeah. They just threw something in that was hanging around the factory. No, the case candy is very cool. The case itself is one of the Tweed, you know, AV2 cases they've been doing, but it's embroidered on the inside. 70th anniversary. Great looking presentation with more case candy than they're putting in anything else, including custom shops. So
or other AV2s,
or other AV2s. So let's take a listen. 54 Strat, straight through the Blues Junior. I think it sounds good. Let's check it out.
Well, so there you have it. It's a 1954 American Vintage 2 reissue Stratocaster that is really unique in its, in the fact that it's reissuing what was there in the beginning, so to speak. And I just think these are very cool. And, we're not going to see them again for arguably 10 more years.
Yeah, 10 more years. And then we'll make a video that's like, if you look back at our old video from 10 years
we
ago,
didn't know what we were doing.
But within the AV2 line, there is a 57 Strat and there's a 61 Strat. And of course, there's already other 70th anniversary models that we've shown you. That we got the American Pro 2 70th anniversary. We got the Nebula Noir, which is the player. And then if it's your thing, if you like two-color sunbursts, there actually are just normal players and two-color sunbursts that are part of the kind of release of the 70th anniversary. This one, to me, I mean, I love a Pro 2. So that Comet Burst, it's great. I mean, it's just kind of a flame top, different color. This one is nice because it plays into a series that, does this. I like the 57, but it's a wildly different guitar than this one when it comes to the pickups and the neck, the finishes you can get. 61, I think, has been the most popular, partially because of those finishes and the rosewood board and everything. But this one, it's cool because it could have just been part of that series. But I like that they kind of preserve. This is a limited release. Yep. It's pretty true to form. I mean, there will be custom shop versions of this guitar that we will have access to, fingers crossed. But in terms of something that gets really close to it, with a nitro finish, accurate pickups and plastics and carves and everything, this is the closest that you're going to get to a custom shop with this year's anniversary releases that isn't out of custom shop.
If you're a fan of the Strat, and I am, I think it's something that, is cool to own as part of your collection, to play. And I just think it's interesting to think back to what was going on in the 50s in our country, kind of in pop culture, and what resulted in the development of this guitar. I've heard other people talk about the fact, and we brought it up, Leo Fender did not design this guitar for what musicians eventually ended up using it for. We talk about the brightness of the pickups, and he was a big fan of like country western, swing, and Hawaiian music. And of course you create this and you give musicians a chance, and they're like, let's see how loud we can turn this amp up, and let's create distortion, and let's just make this do things that was never imagined. And what's really great about that is like with this three-way switch to figure out those in-betweens, like so many of our guitar heroes were doing back in the day, that it became a part of guitar lore, and then eventually a part of the design of the guitar that led to the five-way switch. And then that got replicated by so many things. So it's a very cool point in history that I think is very, very meaningful. And I think they've executed it well. And it's not an inexpensive guitar, but it's up there with about what an AV2 costs. So $25.99.99?
$25.99.99. And the other ones are going to be $22.99, $23, something like that. It's a little bit more for something that's a little more rare. I doubt that there's going to be very many of these at all this year. I mean, We have a handful coming to us. We already saw in our dealer portal that they're already out of stock and back ordered, but there in general is just not a ton of nitro finished AV2s.
Yeah, nitro stuff coming out of the Corona factory seems to be a bit of a bottleneck. So if you have been looking for anything from AV2 and having some trouble finding particular models or finishes, that's probably going to be why, just FYI.
Yeah, but let us know, because we were proactive enough to get in line early on. So we do have, you know, the other Strats that we talked about, and there's a right one for everybody. This might not be the perfect guitar for you, but the 57s are great, 61s are great. This is just kind of a special, you know, homage to what started it all. I heard that Leo Fender built this in a cave
with a box of scraps.
Yeah. And that's how it's done. That's what changed history.
That's going on Instagram.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's where it all started. It has led to you know, decades and decades of great music, lots of fantastic guitars. I'd like to hear in the comments below, are you a fan of the kind of early stuff, or do you prefer, you know, later iterations as things kind of developed?
1989 Elite. Yeah.
I'm thinking more early 60s, but sure.
Yeah.
You know, because particularly with Strats, you have like, you know, your late 50s stuff is its own thing. And then the early 60s, like the L series stuff, is kind of its own thing before CBS. And then you have the CBS era of things. You know, for myself, like when it comes to Telecasters, I really like the earliest Teles. I bought a 51 AV2 Tele because I really like that, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at on a lot of this stuff. I really dig this guitar for those reasons. So I'd like to know in the comments what you think about the 1954 reissue, or do you prefer the 57 or 61 and so forth?
Whatevs.
But if you do want information about this guitar, you want to get in line, purchase this one, pre-order others, or what have you, you should go to our website, which is
alamomusic.com.
Can you enunciate that a little bit better?
alamomusic.com.
That's great. That sounded like wayfair.com.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So, yeah, alamomusic.com. We got photos. You can chat with us. There's specs there. And we'll compare stuff for you, too, whether you can come visit us in store or not, and we can get you the right guitar to suit your needs. And if you are a fan of what we're talking about and guitars in general, make sure if you haven't done so that you subscribe, you turn on notifications, you like our videos, and they keep coming back, right?
You got to do it.
Keep coming back. We'll see you next time.